Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Journey of a Disability Warrior, the roads we've traveled. Today's guest is Kate Evans, and she joins us today to share information about her family's unique journey and how she advocates for her young son, Lincoln. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for interviewing me.
Tell me a little bit about yourself and your family.
So, me and my husband have been married for 6 years now. We got married really young and we had Emery really young. So, I have a little girl that just turned 4 last week. And Lincoln is 2. He has cartilage hair hypoplasia, and the kids are 16 months apart. So, we have 2 really close.
What form of dwarfism does Lincoln have, and what information would you like to share about his diagnosis?
So Lincoln has 2 conditions. He has cartilage hair hypoplasia, which is the form of dwarfism that he has. And then he has a secondary diagnosis, that's severe combined immunodeficiency. So it's a kind of offset from his primary diagnosis. That form of dwarfism that he has, it's really common to have an immunodeficiency. And he just so happened to get a very severe form of that immunodeficiency.
Tell me about your pregnancy with Lincoln and getting his diagnosis.
So that was very, very stressful. Whenever I was 12 weeks pregnant, we had issues finding a heartbeat with him. And that was so crazy because with my daughter, she was 9 months old when we got pregnant with Lincoln. So I had just been through pregnancy. And I had this, thought of what my pregnancy would be like the second time, because my first pregnancy, for the most part, was pretty standard. But we had issues with Lincoln's, heartbeat from the beginning. And then, we got his anatomy scan. They said everything looked great, but it looked like he lacked a heart chamber. I was like, oh, okay. Well, everybody assured me that it was okay. He was just really little, probably was fine. Well, we elected to do a 4D ultrasound. And the lady, when we were doing the ultrasound, we had traveled to Alabama, and she said, have they said anything to you about his size? And I was just like, no, I mean, everything's been pretty good up until this point. And she was just a lady that was doing it out of her home. She had been an ultrasound tech for, I think, like 20 something years. And she said, well, I'm gonna need you to write down the name of your doctor in Starkville, if you don't mind. And I was like, okay, yeah, we can do that. And I was like, it was weird the rest of the appointment. I could tell something was wrong. And at this point, I was probably like 25, 26 weeks pregnant. And I went to go see my doctor the next week just for one of my routine OB visits. And he just kind of said, okay, well, we're just going to do an elective ultrasound. And I was like, well, I've already had 3. I mean, why am I having another one? You don't expect to have another one until right before you have the baby, or even after, or, while you're in labor. And I was like, okay, well, that's kind of weird. He said, we're just going to check his heart, make sure everything's okay. Well, I could tell he was lying to me, and I knew he was doing it, not necessarily to be malicious, but it was just, I felt off and I was freaking out. The ultrasound tech, does the ultrasound, and she said, okay, I'm going to get the doctor in here and I'm going to let him look. And he said, he did the scans and took me back to the room. He said, I'm gonna need you to send you a specialist. He said, I think your son has a birth defect. He said, I think he may have dwarfism. And I was like, I kind of laughed because, I mean, me and my husband are both almost 6 feet tall. We're very tall family. And for him to tell me that my kid had dwarfism, I was like, that can't be right. I mean, I was shattered, and now I feel kind of silly that I was upset about that, but I was young. I was 24 at the time. And I was just like, this can't be right. So he sent us to a specialist, and the specialist basically told us that Lincoln would not survive. He said, your son has thanatophoric dysplasia, which is a type of dwarfism. At the time, we had no idea that there are over 400 different kinds of dwarfism. We had no idea. I thought, if you were a little person, you were a little person, and that was it. And now we know different. It's a very vast spectrum. And the doctor told us, he was like, yeah, your son's not going to live. You need to prepare yourself to not have a child at the end of this pregnancy. And I mean, I get emotional thinking about it because I was just, you don't ever know what to say about that. And then we were told to go to Le Bonheur to get a second opinion. And Le Bonheur's like, I think there's a 50-50 chance that this baby will survive. We were like, okay, well, that's better than what we're being told over there. Well, we had 3 appointments a week. I was 28 weeks pregnant when we found out that Lincoln may not survive. We had 3 appointments a week until I delivered at 35 weeks. I delivered early. He was slightly preterm, but he was 1 day from being, 36 weeks. And we still didn't know if he was going to live. We had to talk to our families about where we were going to bury him. We had to think about what we were going to do with Emery during that time. We were supposed to have him at Le Bonheur. They said, if you have him in Starkville, he won't survive, like absolutely won't survive, because they don't have the equipment to take care of your baby. He's going to be very severely deformed. we were like, okay, well, and then I went into labor in Starkville, and I had my labor with my daughter lasted 4 hours. I was like, we are not making it to Memphis. Like, this is not happening. And we had him at Starkville, and we went home 2 days later. Like, it was just perfect. I mean, he had breathing problems, but they said that's very common with little boys to have breathing issues and when they're born. And I remember when he was born, I looked at the nurses and I was freaking out. I was like, I mean, what does he look like? Like, is he okay? I mean, is he? And she was like, he is fine. He is beautiful. Because we had been told he was going to be deformed and live for maybe 2 hours. And I think that's very common for people with dwarfism to have that kind of pregnancy. And it's just sad that there's not a lot of medical knowledge around dwarfism where they can say, yeah, I mean, chances are your baby's probably going to be okay. There is a chance that maybe they won't survive. But for the most part, I feel like from my stories with people, most babies with dwarfism survive and have a normal life. So that was a very difficult time. But I mean, it's just amazing the different doctor opinions you can get when you're going through something like that.
What message would you like to share with other parents who have just received a new diagnosis and they feel a little bit lost?
So I can definitely relate. And I know when I was pregnant, I spent every waking moment searching Google. I would type in Lincoln's measurements and try to find stories like mine that matched, that had positive outcomes. And most of the ones that had their, newborn's limbs measuring 10 and 11 weeks behind what they were supposed to be ended up in a fatal diagnosis. So I would just say, try not to read into stuff online, because I'm not going to say you're not going to Google it, because you're going to Google it. You're going to. And just try not to read too much into it and try to reach out. Facebook is a great platform to find other parents that have gone through similar things. I know whenever I first found out about Lincoln maybe having dwarfism, I got on Facebook and I found a community of parents that had kids with dwarfism, and I would see their kids, and it helps to find a community of people that are going through what you're going through.
What would you like people to know about Lincoln?
He is just like any other kid. I mean, he has his own things that he's gone through in life, and it scares me how tough he is, because he's really not scared of anything. And there's not a single person in our life that knows Lincoln that doesn't hear his story and get inspired. Or, it's like my grandma always says that you can see Lincoln and there's no way to be in a bad mood. I mean, it's just to see what he's been through. He went through chemo at 2 months old and went through his bone marrow transplant when he was 3 months old. And he was in strict isolation up until COVID hit. And then we came out of isolation as the rest of the world was going into isolation. And so we were isolated again. And he's just like, you would never know that he spent the first year and a half of his life away from human contact for the most part, besides family, because he's just this little social butterfly, that loves everybody.
What sort of relationship does Lincoln have with his sister and his other family members?
They fight constantly. They're 16 months apart, so you can imagine. Emery just turned 4 last week, so they were 2 and 3. And I feel like I've had a baby for the past 4 years. It's been just they fight all the time and they play all the time. And our family really took the diagnosis hard when we first got it. And if I'm being really honest, it kind of frustrated me in the beginning, because I just wanted everybody to, not that everybody was not supportive, but I think everybody found it difficult, and I was kind of defensive. And now, I mean, not that they weren't supportive, like I said, but I mean, everybody just loves him so much. And I couldn't have asked for more from our family and our friends that in our little support group, that just, it's almost like they look at him and they don't see anything different between him and Emery. And that's all I could ever ask for in our family and friends.
How has Lincoln learned to adapt to his surroundings?
I know this is gradually changing as he gets older, because when he's a baby, when he was a baby, he didn't really have to have many accommodations to get through. He never really crawled. He's been doing physical therapy since he was 6 months old, and that's helped a lot. He's had the same physical therapist, and we love her to death. She has been there from the beginning, and he still sees her, every week. But we've had to get him up some stairs that he can carry around the house with him. If he wants to get up on the couch, he uses his little stairs to climb up on the couch. But other than that, he kind of just lives like any other 2-year-old. He's throws tantrums, throws toys, hits his sister. I mean, he's kind of, just all over the place at this point. But I know as he gets older, I can tell we're already needing to learn more and more ways for him to interact with things that we don't even think twice about, like washing his hands, or we're about to start potty training and he's not going to be able to get up on the toilet. So, we're going to have to figure things out like that, but it's nothing that we can't figure out. So,
What are the most challenging aspects of parenting a child with dwarfism?
um, right now he's still so little, it's hard to really comment on it a lot because up until about the past 6 to 8 months, nobody really noticed that he had dwarfism. But we took the kids to the pumpkin patch this fall, and one thing that I noticed where people were starting to notice that Lincoln was running around with the other kids, and there was one point where he was climbing up a slide and sliding down it, and we were maybe a good foot or two apart from it, but he's a toddler, so he was kind of running around with his sister around us, and I could see parents kind of looking at me like, why is she letting that baby climb up and down those stairs? And one mom actually approached me and she said, how old is he? I said, he's almost 3. And she said, oh, I thought he was 1. I said, no, he's almost 3. And I don't even think about it half the time until we're out in public a lot around a lot of other people. But so far, that's really all we've encountered as a negative side effect of anything to do with Lincoln's diagnosis. So that's, people are going to say something no matter what your kid looks like.
What has been the most rewarding aspect of parenting a child with dwarfism?
Honestly, during our transplant process with Lincoln, which what Lincoln went through was very specific to his type of dwarfism. Most kids with dwarfism have achondroplasia. That accounts for about 80% of people with dwarfism. Lincoln's diagnosis is very rare. And so there's only about 1,000 people in the world diagnosed with his specific type of dwarfism. Cartilage hair hypoplasia is very prominent in the Amish community, so a lot of it's probably not documented. As far as me and my husband know, we're not Amish descent. It can happen in other populations too, but it's just very prominent in that population. But from that, it's hard for us to find people that are specific with his diagnosis. But one of the most rewarding things that we've encountered is a group of moms from all over the world that we talk on a daily basis. I mean, I've made some really, really good friends, and that's kind of a selfish, rewarding part of it. But all of these moms, I mean, we have moms in Sweden and South America and China, and we all have kids with this diagnosis, and we talk on a daily basis. And I've never felt so seen as a mom than since I found these women, and we are each other's support system. And our support system with Lincoln through his transplant was just, you have somebody there for you. But when you actually have to see it in action, like everybody coming together to take care of Emery while we were in the hospital, and just the way that our family just takes care of Lincoln and us in general has just been, we had people praying for him all over Mississippi and all the surrounding states that I didn't even know. It was just like one person told this person and this church would pray, and then they would pray. And it just felt like I could get chills thinking about it, just all the people that we had as a support system. And that's just been so rewarding to know we have all those people there for us.
What are your concerns about Lincoln's future, as well as your hopes for his future?
So I'm a worrier, and I think about things that are going to happen 15 years in the future. And I like to plan, and I'm already thinking about Lincoln driving and Lincoln getting a girlfriend, or, just things that I'm just terrified, and I want to just shelter him from everything that could hurt him. But at the same time, I want him to have a normal life. And so I already struggle with, okay, well, what are we going to have to do for him when he starts kindergarten so that he can use the bathroom with the other kids? Or what are we going to have to do so he can just maneuver life in a way that people probably don't have to think twice about sometimes? I already think 10 years in the future on things that he may have to encounter. And I'm already trying to work out what I can do to help.
What does being an advocate mean to you, and how do you advocate for Lincoln?
So it was hard in the beginning when I didn't know what we were dealing with. But now me and my husband kind of just learned that you can't take everything the doctor says as what is 100% right. So for advocating for Lincoln, I've had to kind of do my own research. I mean, especially with his condition being so rare. He had a team of doctors in Ohio that consulted with our team in Mississippi at UMC. And we actually traveled to Delaware to meet with orthopedic specialists to take care of Lincoln. I mean, we could probably easily see somebody local that maybe has never treated, somebody with cartilage hair hypoplasia. And honestly, it may be okay, but we just want to do what we can to give him the best chance. And so we travel to see doctors that know more of what they're talking about. And like when we were going through Lincoln's transplant process, we just had to ask the doctors questions and not really just take what they say and say, okay, you have to question it. And to take it even a little step further, like people in our life, we don't have a lot of people that say negative things about him. I know that that's probably going to be more when he's older, but then I can't control other people, but the people in our lives that see him on a day-to-day basis, if somebody says something that I think could be taking offensively to Lincoln, even if they don't mean it, I'll just politely say, maybe we should say that a different way, or maybe we should do that a different way. And to me, that's how I'm going to advocate for him. And I want him in the future to advocate for himself. And we're almost teaching him not to take his condition lightly, but to not take it so seriously either. Because at the end of the day, we're all just people. And really the only difference in Lincoln and somebody else in his class is going to be he's a foot shorter, and we want people to see that there's going to be nothing different at all with Lincoln. And we want him to be able to tell people that too. If somebody says something with him, not to necessarily for him to get defensive and to fight somebody, but to stand up for himself and say, hey, you shouldn't say that. I'm just like you shouldn't say anything.
That kind of comes into my next question, which is, what are your concerns about school and how his peers will treat him?
I really hope that he is accepted. And I think the generation that our kids are growing up in is way more accepting of people and their identities than they've ever been before. And that makes me hopeful that maybe he won't have it as bad as I think he might. And I know us being in a rural area is a little different than maybe somewhere where there's a lot of different types of people around. But we plan on staying in this little town. And so I hope that Lincoln will be well known and everybody will say, hey, that's Lincoln, not, hey, that's that kid with dwarfism.
What questions do you get asked most frequently when you meet people for the first time?
People more often just say, how old is he? Or they hear him talking because now he's talking really well. And they'll just say, oh, okay. Or, they see him and Emery together and they'll just be walking through Walmart. And I can see people just kind of looking at him like, she's letting this 1-year-old just walk around Walmart. I mean, not that I'm not right behind him with the buggy, but it's just, I see people look at him. And we more so don't really get people saying anything, but they'll more just look at him. And I can tell what they're probably thinking.
How do you recommend parents talk to their children about dwarfism?
So Emery is 4. She's very intelligent and she gets things sometimes too much. And so she's kind of picked up on Lincoln is smaller. I mean, she has other friends in her class that are close to Lincoln's age, and she understands that they're smaller or that they're bigger than Lincoln. And so we've just kind of told her Lincoln's bones grow slower than your bones. There's nothing different necessarily about Lincoln. It's really just God made his bones grow slower and he can do everything that you can do. He just may do it differently. And that's what we've kind of, the kids in his life that we want parents to tell their kids is he's going to do everything you're going to do. It just may not look the same.
Tell me a little bit about person first language and why it's so important.
So that's been, if we have any issues with anything, that's the biggest thing we have problems with people. And I don't usually take offense to it because I myself was very ignorant in that department. I didn't know the correct terminology to use for somebody with dwarfism. I knew that saying the M word was offensive. That's pretty common. You shouldn't say that. But I didn't know that you would call them a little person, or a lot of people prefer so-and-so with dwarfism. With Lincoln, we really just call him Lincoln. I mean, at this point, I don't really tell people that he has dwarfism unless they ask. I don't really see a reason to go around just talking about his medical condition. That's not common. Hi, nice to meet you. I have, a broken ankle, or, something like that. It's just, we kind of keep it, that's just Lincoln. Nice to meet you. And I think that's important for everybody to kind of have their own identity as themselves. You wouldn't want to introduce yourself to somebody as, hi, I'm so-and-so, and this is what I'm really insecure about, as how we look at it.
Tell me about your participation in writing a piece about Lincoln in the book Special Delivery from Pregnancy to Toddlerhood.
So, mom from Biloxi, she has dwarfism, and she has kids with dwarfism, and they all have achondroplasia. She had saw Lincoln's story circulate on Facebook. We had created him a Facebook page whenever we were in the hospital, and it was the easiest way to keep everybody up to date. So she found it through there. And I've always loved writing. And when she approached me, I was like, heck yeah, I'll do this. Because like I said, when I was pregnant with Lincoln, there were no resources out there. I mean, it was kind of just like, here's the doctor's told you, kind of run with it. And I wanted to be a part of a project that would give moms something to find. So if a mom gets diagnosed with a child while she's pregnant that may have dwarfism, or even after they're born, because that's also common, I wanted them to be able to find this book and say, okay, here's 15 moms from across the country that have kids with different types of dwarfism. All of these kids have different ailments, as like a secondary condition, and it's okay. Kind of one thing that Angela said when we first started the book was she wanted it to be very uplifting, and we wanted to be a positive book out there for parents that may be struggling. It's a part of a Little Perspective series. Angela has a podcast, and she has another book that's out, part of the series, and it's Special Delivery from Pregnancy to Toddlerhood. And you can find it on Amazon, and you can purchase it as a digital copy for Kindle, or you can purchase a physical copy. And we've had a lot of people that want copies from me and Lincoln signed. I get Lincoln to sign his little name on there, and I sign a little note too. And I have an email that I can directly receive those book purchases from.
Tell me a little bit about early intervention and how that process has been, and what the transition plan out of early intervention looks like.
So that was kind of a difficult thing with us in the beginning. I did not want Lincoln to have any kind of interventions. I can't explain to you why I felt that way. I think it's just because we had kind of had doctors involved with him from before he was even born. And when we were in the hospital at UMC during his transplant, we had somebody approach us, and she said, I think he would be a candidate. Do you mind me getting him started on physical therapy? I didn't know if physical therapy would be good for Lincoln, in his condition. I didn't know. So I took time to pause, and I learned about it. I read up on it. I found different resources through Facebook, and we had somebody from Mississippi State that had contacted us. I spoke to her about it. And we ultimately decided that we wanted to do whatever we could to get Lincoln where he needed to be with his peers. So he's been doing physical therapy since he was 6 months old. And at first, I was thinking, will he be doing this without physical therapy, or is the physical therapy helping? I kind of wondered what he would be doing on his own. And it has, now that I look at it, I can tell that it has just helped him soar and figure out his own way. Jay works with him, and she teaches him his own way of doing things. I mean, just him when he was little, learning how to sit up. I mean, he had to do it a whole different way than anybody else would do it. And I know he may have learned that on his own, but he learned it faster because he had those early intervention services. And so that's been great. I mean, it helps, we have our own private insurance, but that helps with that. As far as on the financial side, the early intervention services are great. And now he does physical therapy, occupational therapy, and he does speech therapy at the daycare that he attends, and they come there and do it for him. And it's just helped so much. And I think that we've been contacted that once he turns 3, it's a different program. I'm waiting to be contacted, so I don't know a lot about it, but I think we're going to be contacted by the schools or something to see how he goes with that. I think it's the next step.
A little bit about that, how the experience at Starkville Pediatric Extended Care, also known as SPEC, how has that been for your family and for Lincoln?
It has been, I mean, I really don't know what we would do without him. He was going to one in Columbus and we were having to drive 30 minutes back and forth each day. And that was just it was kind of difficult. And so they're local. It's awesome. And everybody there are nurses and professionally trained. And I have a daughter that's in a regular preschool and they're great. Don't get me wrong, but I can see the difference in the attention that he gets. And I don't think he would get that same attention. I can't say for sure because he's not in that school, but they just love him like their own. I get daily progress reports of what he did, what he ate, how he's doing. They send pictures occasionally and they all love him like their own. And I mean, they're just all great. I don't know enough to good things to say about them. And I know they know exactly what they're doing and what they talk about. And, if Lincoln's ever not feeling well, or if he gets like a rash that breaks out on his arm, they all know, they're nurses, they're trained, they know how to take care of him, and probably better than I do in some ways. It's just, we love having him there.
Right. Do you have any final remarks for any parents listening? Any advice, tips, anything else you would like to add?
I mean, I don't know. I think whenever you get a diagnosis of a child that's not fully able, you don't know where to go, where to think, what to do. And I think the best way to look at it is just to think you have no other choice but just to put your full self. I'm sorry if you hear them screaming, they're fighting. You have no choice but to just give it your all. And I think the best thing to do is just not to think of that child as any different than any other child and just approach it that way. But at the same time, I think it's important for people to know that there will be things that they'll have to do differently, although they are just like any other child. And that's kind of how we've gone with Lincoln, is we understand that things are going to be done differently. But some days I don't even remember that he has dwarfism or an immune deficiency. I forget not that I forget, but I just don't even think about it half the time. He's just Lincoln. That's all there is.
Thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your family's experiences and journey. And I hope you have a great day.
Thank you so much for interviewing me. I love talking about Lincoln.
He's great. We love Lincoln.
He's a mess.